Warm light. Soft music that costs more than most people's rent. Crystal glasses catching gold like tiny suns. At the entrance to the Blackwood Charity Gala, the marble floor looked clean enough to reflect secrets. A security guard's hand closed around a child's wrist. Not hard enough to bruise, just firm enough to say, "Without words, you don't belong here." Lily Hart didn't kick. She didn't thrash. She turned her small hand inward and clutched the broken pocket watch against her chest like it could keep her standing up. The short chain trembled between her fingers. The cracked glass caught the chandelier light, and for a second it looked like the watch was crying. Her sneakers were scrubbed as clean as they could be, but the stitching near one toe had split open. A thin, stubborn thread lifted and fluttered each time she breathed. Behind her, Marla Hart stepped forward. Fast. Too fast. The way someone moves when they already know the room is about to turn cruel. "Sir," Marla said, voice steady but tight. "Please. She has a reason to be here." Dean Victor Langford appeared like a shadow in a tuxedo, not loud, not dramatic, polished. He smiled the way a man smiles when he's already decided the ending. "What we have," Dean said, gentle as a lullaby, "is a security procedure." His gaze dropped to Lily's hands, to the pocket watch. His smile stayed in place. Only his eyes shifted, quick, calculating. "This item," he continued, "matches a report we received earlier, and the child." He glanced at the guests drifting near the doorway, drawn by the quiet tension like moths to a porch light. The child was not cleared to enter. Lily's shoulders rose a fraction. Then she forced them down. Marla slid closer, placing her body between Lily and the guard without touching anyone. A shield that didn't look like a shield, a grandmother's instinct disguised as dignity. "She's not cleared," Marla repeated. "She's on the list. She's invited." Dean's head tilted. Sympathy, manufactured. "If she was invited," he said, "her name would appear. It does not." The guard adjusted his grip. Not tighter, just more certain. Lily's thumb traced the crack in the watch's glass, a tiny, repetitive motion, like counting steps in the dark. Inside the ballroom, laughter rose and fell. A piano drifted through open doors, wealth humming to itself. And over Lily's shoulder, beyond the curtain of suits and perfume, a small stage waited, a spotlight waited, a man waited. Sterling Blackwood stood near the front, a few steps from the stage, framed by donors and board members who angled their bodies toward him like sunflowers toward light. 40-something. Old money in the bones. The kind of presence that didn't need to announce itself. He held a pen in his hand. Not the cheap kind that leaks ink and regrets. A luxury fountain pen. Heavy. Quiet. Final. A large check rested on a polished podium beside him, the numbers too far away to read. But everyone in the room treated it like scripture. Sterling's suit was charcoal, cut perfectly, as if it had never known rain. His wristwatch gleamed at the cuff. He didn't look toward the doorway. He didn't have to. An assistant leaned in close and murmured something. Sterling's eyes stayed forward, and his fingers made a small movement at his wrist. He adjusted his watch, once, twice. A habit that looked like control, like avoidance. Near the entrance, Dean turned his head just enough for Sterling to see the commotion without truly seeing the child. "Mr. Blackwood," Dean said smoothly, projecting calm into the room, "a minor disruption. We'll handle it discreetly." Sterling's gaze flicked not to Lily's face, but to the pocket watch in her hands. A glint, a shape. Then his eyes moved away, sliding past her like she was a stain on the edge of his evening. He adjusted his wristwatch again. and took one step closer to the stage. Marla's breath caught. She held it, then released it through her nose like she was trying to keep her spine straight with air alone. "Sir?" Marla called, trying to make her voice carry without sounding like she was begging, "Mr. Blackwood, please." Sterling did not turn. The room kept moving. The piano kept playing. Dean's smile widened by a hair. He leaned toward the security guard with the gentle authority of a man who knew the building would obey him. "Escort them out," Dean said softly, "before this becomes a scene." Lily's chin lifted. It was a small motion, brave, almost stubborn. The guard started to guide her backward. Lily did something that broke through the polished air like a stone dropped into a still pond. She spoke, not loudly, not dramatically, just a small voice, fighting to stay steady. "I didn't take it," she said. Dean's eyes stayed calm. "That's not what this is about," he replied, "the way you talk to a child who doesn't understand adult rules. This is about safety." Lily's fingers tightened around the watch until the chain dug into her skin. Her gaze darted, fast, across the room. Not searching for sympathy, searching for one person. Sterling! He stood under the lights like a man built from distance. His jaw didn't move. His expression didn't crack. Only his hand shifted. He tapped the pen lightly against the podium once, as if testing the weight of the night. Marla's voice broke through again, controlled but shaking at the edges. "She's a scholarship child," Marla said. "She was told to come. She has paperwork." Dean's smile stayed gentle. "A scholarship," he repeated as if tasting the word, "and yet no record." He lowered his voice just enough that it sounded considerate instead of cruel. "Ma'am," he said, "this kind of environment isn't appropriate for misunderstandings." Guests nearby pretended not to listen while listening to everything. A woman in pearls whispered behind her hand. A man with a silver tie glanced at Lily's shoes and looked away quickly, like guilt might smear. Lily's shoulders went still, too still. She pressed the watch tighter to her chest, and her breath came short, shallow. Marla reached into her bag and pulled out a worn folder. The corners were soft from being handled too many times, like it mattered, like it was all they had left that proved they weren't lying. Her hands shook as she opened it, not from weakness, from fury held under skin. "I have it right here," Marla said. Dean didn't reach for the papers. He didn't need to. "Paper can be forged," he murmured almost kindly. "And theft is theft." Lily's eyes snapped up, her lips parted. Then she swallowed the words like they hurt to keep inside. She looked at Sterling again. He was watching now, not her face, the watch. Something about it had pulled a thread in him he didn't want touched. Sterling's assistant leaned in, whispered again. Sterling's hand moved to his pocket, and the phone screen flashed for a second. Caller ID flashed. Home. Sterling stared at it. He flipped the phone face down in his palm, and for a moment, the ballroom felt colder. If you have ever watched someone get judged by what they wear, by what they don't have, stay with me until the end. Dean lifted his chin, scanning the guests, performing stability. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced softly, "we appreciate your patience. This will be resolved." Resolved. Like Lily was something to mop up. Like Marla was a nuisance. Like the truth didn't matter. Sterling stepped toward the podium. His pen rose. The applause began, polite at first, then stronger. The room eager to move on, eager to forget the child at the door. The guard guided Lily another step back. The pocket watch chain swung. It snagged for the briefest second on the cuff of Sterling's suit as he passed the edge of the crowd. A tiny tug, a small accident, but enough. Sterling halted, just stopped, mid-step. His body didn't react like a man interrupted. It reacted like a man struck. The chain pulled tighter, and the watch slipped from Lily's fingers. It didn't fall far. Sterling's hand shot out and caught it. Fast, instinctive. The room's sound dropped. As if someone had lowered a volume knob, Sterling stared at the pocket watch in his palm, the cracked glass, the old metal, the weight of it. He turned it slightly, and the chain scraped against his skin. Lily reached toward it, fingers trembling, not grabbing, just asking. "Please," she whispered. Sterling's thumb brushed the edge of the crack, wiping a smear of dirt away without thinking. His hand was steady, controlled, but his eyes didn't move. They locked. Something inside the watch shifted, and the lid popped open with a soft click. Not loud, but in that silent room, it sounded like a door opening. Sterling's gaze dropped to the inside. A tiny engraving, too small for the guests to read, too small for Lily to understand. And then he saw it. A mark, a crescent-shaped scratch on the inner rim. Old, specific, impossible to mistake. Sterling's fingers tightened around the watch, not crushing it, just holding it like it could disappear. His pen slipped from his other hand and tapped the podium once, like a heartbeat out of rhythm. Dean's smile faltered for the first time. Just a flicker. Sterling didn't speak. He didn't look up. He simply stared at the mark inside that watch as if it had reached across years and grabbed him by the throat. And the question that should have been impossible rose in the silence, heavy enough to bend the night. How did this watch leave the Blackwood family and end up in a child's hands? Sterling's thumb stayed inside the open lid of the watch, not moving, not blinking, like his body had forgotten how to perform. Around him, the gala tried to restart itself. Someone cleared a throat. A laugh came out too high, too fast. The piano found a safer melody. Dean stepped closer, voice low, controlled, meant only for Sterling. "Mr. Blackwood," he said, "it's nothing. A lost item. A child's misunderstanding." Sterling's eyes didn't lift. His jaw tightened once, and a muscle near his cheek twitched like a warning light behind glass. Lily stood frozen at the edge of the crowd, hands empty now, fingers curled as if they still held the chain. Marla's folder sagged open in her grip. The paper edges looked softer than they should have been, like they had been touched too many times by hope. Sterling closed the watch with a soft click. He didn't hand it back yet. He didn't pocket it either. He just held it, and the weight of it changed the way he stood. The room watched his silence the way people watch a storm form. Dean smiled again, sharper now. "If we could proceed," he said, turning slightly toward the stage. "Your generosity is the reason this institution—" Sterling's hand rose. Not dramatic, not angry, just final. Dean stopped mid-sentence. Sterling finally looked at Lily. Not a warm look, not yet. More like the look a man gives a door he didn't realize was locked. Then he turned to his assistant, barely moving his lips. "Pause." The assistant blinked. "Sir?" Sterling didn't repeat himself. He didn't have to. Men around him didn't ask twice when he said one word. The assistant stepped away quickly. Headset already angled, fingers moving. Sterling's wristwatch caught the light as he shifted his cuff. He adjusted it. Once. Then deliberately, he lowered his hand and stopped touching it. At the entrance, the security guard loosened his grip on Lily's arm by a fraction. Not kindness, confusion. Sterling took one slow step toward Marla and Lily. The marble under his shoes made no sound, but the room heard it anyway. Marla lifted her folder like a shield. Sterling's gaze flicked to the paperwork, then back to the child. "You said it belongs to your mother," Sterling murmured. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried because it belonged to someone the room was trained to obey. Lily swallowed. Her throat worked hard, like it hurt to speak in that place. "Yes," she whispered. She told me to keep it safe." Dean's smile stretched. "Children say things. We should not delay." Sterling didn't look at Dean. He extended the watch toward Lily. Lily reached out fast, then stopped herself. Her fingers hovered, hesitant, like she was afraid it would be taken away again. Sterling's hand remained steady. Lily took the watch with both hands. The chain wrapped around her knuckles like a promise. Her shoulders dropped 1 inch, the smallest relief. Marla tried to breathe quietly, but the air shook as it entered her lungs. Sterling's eyes went to Marla's folder again. "Show me," he said. Marla opened it wider. Her hands trembled, but she forced them still. She offered a letter first, then another paper, with a seal-like stamp that wasn't readable from where the guest stood. "Invitation," she said. "And the scholarship notice. She's been working so hard. We came because they told us." Dean leaned in, voice sweet, like a blade covered in honey. "Those documents aren't verified. That's why we have procedures." Sterling took 1 page from Marla, not grabbing, just accepting it. He scanned it quickly. His eyes moved like someone who reads contracts for a living. He didn't ask Lily to explain. He didn't ask Marla to repeat herself. He simply looked. Then he handed the page back. Not because he didn't believe it, because he wasn't ready to show the room that he did. "Dean," Sterling said, calm, "why is the child not on the list?" Dean spread his hand slightly, a performance of helplessness. "We have donors arriving, security protocols. It's unfortunate, but her name is not present." Marla's voice rose just enough to shake. "Because somebody took it off," she said. The words hung there, a quiet accusation. Dean's eyes narrowed for a blink, then softened again. "That is an assumption." Lily squeezed the watch until her fingers turned pale. Sterling's gaze dropped to her hands. The way she held it wasn't possessive. It was protective, like she'd been protecting that object longer than she'd been protecting herself. Sterling inhaled slowly. He adjusted his posture, returning to the shape of a man who doesn't get pulled into messes in public. "Handle it discreetly," he said to Dean, repeating Dean's own phrase back to him. But the words didn't land like permission. They landed like a test. Sterling turned slightly toward the stage, as if he meant to finish what he came to do. And the gala exhaled. The room chose the easier story. The story where the powerful man proceeds. The child gets removed. The music continues. Marla's face tightened, but she didn't break. She slid closer to Lily, whispering something that couldn't be heard. Lily nodded once, fast, like a soldier receiving orders. Dean's hand lifted again, a small signal to security. Polite removal. Clean exit. No mess. Sterling took 2 steps toward the podium. Applause restarted, grateful and relieved. The pen was placed back into Sterling's fingers by the assistant as if it belonged there. Sterling's hand raised, and then, just as he brought the pen down toward the check, his phone vibrated again. He didn't want to look. The vibration continued, insisting. His assistant glanced at the screen and leaned in, whispering without moving his lips. "Your father's office, sir." Sterling's fingers stiffened around the pen. His eyes stayed on the paper. He didn't answer. He set the phone down face down, like a closed lid. The gala watched, pretending not to. Sterling lifted the pen again. The crowd leaned forward in their hearts. And at the entrance, Dean's voice dropped close to Marla's ear so only she and Lily could hear. "I gave you a chance to leave quietly," he said. Marla straightened. "We're not leaving. She earned—" Dean's smile didn't fade. "I can call the police," he murmured. "And if they arrive, they'll ask questions. About how you got into this building, about that watch, about your address, your custody arrangement, your history." Marla's breath caught. Not because she was guilty, because she understood the power he was swinging. Lily's head lifted quickly, eyes wide. Not with drama. With the sharp fear of a child who has heard adults threaten the one person she relies on. Marla put a hand behind Lily's back, pressing gently, grounding her. Dean's voice stayed soft. "And if there are concerns," he continued, "someone might decide the child needs supervision, a different home for a while." Lily's fingers tightened on the watch until the chain cut into her skin. Her eyes shone, but she kept her mouth closed. She was trying so hard to be invisible, so hard not to give them a reason. Marla's lips parted. She wanted to argue. She wanted to fight. But the words stuck because she could see the room's truth. The room would believe him, not her. Dean turned away from them, already satisfied, and gave a small nod to the security guard. The guard stepped forward again, careful, practiced. "Ma'am," he said quietly to Marla, "we need you to come with us." Marla pulled her folder close to her chest. Lily stepped back, pressing into Marla's side. Dean added, almost gently, "Do not make this difficult." Sterling's pen hovered above the check. The stage lights warmed his face. The crowd waited. And on the edge of the room, a grandmother and a child were about to be escorted out like a stain. Sterling's hand lowered. The pen tip touched the paper. A single dot of ink appeared. But his signature didn't follow. Instead, Sterling's gaze slid toward the entrance again. To Lily. To the watch. To the way the child's shoulders had turned inward like she was trying to fold herself smaller to survive. Sterling's jaw tightened. His fingers stopped moving. The gala held its breath without knowing why. Sterling lifted the pen off the paper. That tiny dot of ink sat there like a warning. He didn't sign. Dean's smile faltered again, just for a heartbeat. Sterling leaned slightly toward his assistant, voice barely above air. "Get me the guest registry," he murmured. The assistant blinked. "Now, sir?" Sterling's eyes didn't leave the entrance. "Now." The assistant moved fast, and at the doorway, the guard began guiding Marla and Lily toward a side hallway, toward the service corridor, away from the chandeliers, away from witnesses, away from mercy. Lily's chain snagged on the guard's sleeve for a second. The watch jerked. Lily gasped. Sound small, sharp. Sterling's head turned fully this time. His body shifted as if something inside him finally chose a direction. He started walking, not toward the stage, toward them. And whatever he was about to do, it wasn't going to be discreet. The service corridor didn't look like the gala. The air changed first. Out there, the ballroom smelled like perfume and polished wood and expensive wine. In here, it smelled like bleach, damp carpet, and something faintly metallic like a mop bucket that had been used too many times. The lights were harsher, too. White, flat, unforgiving. The walls were painted a tired beige that had been patched more than once. A cart of folded linen sat against one side, stacked in neat squares like the building's secret heartbeat. Lily's shoes made a soft scuffing sound on the industrial flooring as the guard guided them forward. Marla kept her hand on Lily's shoulder, her fingers spread like a shield. The guard wasn't cruel, he wasn't kind either. He was doing what he was told. His palm hovered near his radio, ready to call for backup if the older woman raised her voice. Marla didn't. She swallowed her words and walked, because she knew the room they had left behind had already chosen who to believe. Lily held the watch against her chest, not tucked away, not hidden. Like she refused to let it be treated like contraband. The chain trembled against her fingers with every step. Behind them, the sound of the gala faded into a muffled hum. Laughter became distant. Applause became nothing more than air vibrating through doors. Dean's footsteps followed, not rushed, measured, like he was confident the hallway belonged to him. "You made a scene," he said quietly, as if he were scolding a child. Marla didn't turn. "You made it," she said back, voice low, controlled. Dean chuckled once. The sound had no warmth in it. "You can tell yourself that," he murmured, "but the outcome remains the same." The guard stopped beside an unmarked door. No sign, no name, just a metal handle and a keypad. A door that looked like it led to places guests were not meant to see. "Ma'am," the guard said to Marla, "we need to take you out this way." Marla's folder shifted in her arms. Paper edges fluttered. Lily's eyes darted to the door. Her breath came in quicker. She fought it. She tried to press it down, the way she'd probably learned to press down everything else. Dean stepped closer, voice like a calm announcement. "If you cooperate," he said, "this ends cleanly." Lily tightened her grip on the watch. The chain slid and the cracked lid caught the corridor light. For a moment, the watch looked less like jewelry and more like a wound you could hold. Marla leaned down, her mouth close to Lily's ear. "We're okay," she whispered. "A lie said, with love." Lily nodded once too quickly. The guard reached for the door handle, and then the air behind them shifted. A different kind of silence arrived, not the silence of a corridor, the silence of someone who carries power and doesn't need to announce it. Sterling Blackwood appeared at the far end of the hallway, walking toward them. He didn't hurry. He didn't run. He moved like the building itself had decided to send him. His suit was still perfect. Charcoal fabric, clean lines, cuffs that sat exactly where they should. The kind of clothing that belonged under chandeliers, not fluorescent lights. But the corridor didn't flatter him. The harsh light caught the faint shadow under his eyes, the stubble he probably didn't have time to shave before events like this. It made him look less like a figure on a magazine cover and more like a man who hadn't slept well in a long time. His assistant followed 2 steps behind, holding a tablet and a stack of papers, breathing too fast. Dean's expression snapped into something smoother the moment he saw Sterling. "Mr. Blackwood," he said, voice brightening as if this were all a misunderstanding he could charm away. "We're resolving it." Sterling's gaze slid past Dean, straight to Lily, straight to the watch. The chain was still wrapped around her fingers. His eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Not suspicion, recognition, trying to rise too early. He stopped a few feet away, close enough to feel the tension between bodies, close enough for Lily to smell him. Faint cologne, crisp fabric, something cool like winter. Lily didn't step forward. She didn't step back either. She lifted her chin the way she had in the ballroom. Small, stubborn dignity. Sterling spoke, voice quiet, clipped. "Release them." The guard hesitated. His eyes flicked to Dean. Dean smiled, still in control. "Sir, it's procedure. We can't allow—" Sterling didn't raise his voice. He didn't look at the guard when he spoke again. "Release them." The guard's fingers loosened from Marla's elbow, not because his heart changed, because his training did. Marla's shoulders didn't relax, not fully. She still stood between Sterling and Lily, out of instinct. Sterling shifted his gaze to Marla. His eyes paused on her folder, the old papers, the worn corners. Then, carefully, he lowered his attention again to Lily. "May I see it?" he asked. Lily's fingers tightened. She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes flicked to Marla. A silent question. Marla hesitated too. She wanted to say no. She wanted to protect Lily from every person in a suit in this building. But Sterling didn't reach for the watch. He didn't demand it. He simply waited. A man used to having things placed in his hands, choosing to keep his hands still. Marla swallowed. "Lily," she murmured, "it's okay. Just hold on tight." Lily took a small step forward. The chain dragged slightly against her knuckles. She extended the watch with both hands. Sterling accepted it the same way someone accepts something fragile. Not with a pinch, with his whole palm underneath. The weight of the watch settled into his hand. His thumb brushed the cracked lid. A tiny flake of old metal caught under his nail. He didn't react, but his breathing changed, a fraction shorter, a fraction sharper. Dean cleared his throat, impatient. "Mr. Blackwood, we should return to the stage. Your signature." Sterling's eyes didn't lift. He turned the watch, slowly, watching how the crack traveled across the lid like a thin lightning bolt. Then he found the chain. The chain was short, not decorative, cut and reattached, like someone once fixed it in a hurry. Sterling's fingers paused. He flipped the watch over. And there it was, a half-moon gouge on the edge of the casing. Not pretty, not random. A scar. His index finger traced the curve without thinking. The motion was small, almost private, like he was touching a memory to make sure it was real. Lily watched him. Her eyes widened just enough to show a child's confusion, because she could feel it too. Something in the air had changed. Sterling's jaw tightened. He pressed the tiny latch with his thumbnail. The watch opened. The sound was faint, but in that corridor, it echoed. Inside, the face was old, stained, frozen, forever at a dead time. The hands didn't move. Time trapped. Sterling stared at the stopped hands as if they were staring back. Then his gaze dropped to the inside of the lid. There was a faint engraving, not readable from a distance, not a bold message, a small, personal mark, something someone put there for themselves, not for the world. Sterling's throat worked. He swallowed once, hard. His assistant shifted behind him, nervous, trying not to breathe too loudly. Dean leaned forward, voice sharpening. "What is this?" he demanded, losing some of his polite mask. "That watch is not relevant. The girl is trespassing. This is..." Sterling's hand lifted, not a command this time, a warning. Dean stopped speaking, mid-word. Sterling's eyes stayed on the engraving. His pupils tightened. His fingers trembled once, just once. Then, with visible effort, he forced them still. He closed the watch slowly. Click. The sound felt heavier than it should have. Sterling lowered his head. His eyes lifted from the watch to Lily's face. And for the first time, he looked at her like he was actually seeing her. Not as an interruption, not as a problem, as something his life had been missing without his permission. "You said it belonged to your mother," he murmured. Lily nodded, small and quick. "Yes." Sterling's voice didn't rise, but the corridor felt tighter around the words. "What is your mother's name?" Marla's breath caught. She stepped forward immediately. "That's not..." she started. Her hand went to Lily's shoulder again, protective. Lily's mouth opened, then closed. She looked at Marla, conflicted. Marla leaned down, whispering fast, urgent. "We don't have to tell him anything," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "We just need to go home." Sterling's eyes didn't leave Lily. He wasn't staring. He wasn't demanding. But he wasn't moving away either. Dean's voice cut in, colder now. "Mr. Blackwood," he said, "this is inappropriate. We have donors waiting. If you engage with this situation, we risk—" Sterling turned his head slightly toward Dean. His eyes were calm. His calm was worse than anger. "Stop," Sterling said. One word. Dean's face tightened. Sterling's assistant stepped closer, tablet in hand, whispering into Sterling's ear. "Sir," he murmured, "the registry. Her name was on it. It was removed this afternoon. The log shows an admin override." Dean's smile vanished. The fluorescent light showed the truth on his face before he could hide it. Sterling didn't react like a man surprised. He reacted like a man who had just found the first thread of a rope he'd been choking on for years. He looked down at the watch again, then back at Lily. Slowly, Sterling lowered himself. Right there, in the corridor, his suit knee met the industrial floor. A billionaire kneeling in a hallway that smelled like bleach. He brought the watch down to Lily's height, holding it out like it was a sacred thing. "Listen to me," he said, voice low enough that it felt like it belonged only to her. "No one is taking you out that door." Lily's eyes shimmered. She didn't cry loud. Her lower lip trembled, then she bit it, hard, like she didn't want to give anyone the satisfaction. Marla stared at Sterling, stunned by the sight of him on the floor. Dean stepped forward abruptly, voice sharp now, losing control. "This is a mistake," he hissed. "You don't understand what you're doing." Sterling didn't stand yet. He stayed kneeling. He kept his body between Lily and the door. And he finally looked up at Dean as if Dean were something he could dismantle. "Bring the security footage," Sterling said to his assistant, "and call the board liaison." The assistant nodded, already moving. Dean's nostrils flared. His hands curled, then relaxed again. He was thinking, plotting. Sterling could see it. Marla could feel it. And Lily, still holding the watch with both hands now, looked like she was bracing for the next hit. Because Dean's kind of cruelty didn't end in corridors. It escalated. Dean leaned in, voice low and lethal. "If you do this," he said, "I will make sure she loses the scholarship permanently. I will make sure every institution knows what kind of family she comes from." Sterling's face didn't change, but his hand, still near the watch, clenched once. Then he stood, slow, controlled. A man rising not into rage, but into war. And down the corridor, somewhere behind the ballroom doors, the applause swelled again. Because the gala thought the story was still about money. It wasn't. Not anymore. Dean didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The kind of power he carried didn't live in his voice. It lived in policies, in doors that locked, in radios, in the way people in uniforms glanced at him first before they ever looked at a child. He took a slow step back, giving Sterling space as if he were being reasonable. Then he smiled again, not warm, not friendly. A smile that said, "I know exactly which levers to pull." "Mr. Blackwood," Dean said, smoothing his cuff as if this were a meeting. "You're under pressure. You're reacting. It's understandable." Sterling's face stayed still, but his hand, his right hand, moved toward his wrist. Thumb and forefinger found the edge of his own watch, a small adjustment, a small ritual, a way to avoid looking too long at Lily. Dean noticed it. Dean always noticed tells. And I'm trying to protect you, Dean continued, voice velvet soft. Protect the event, protect the institution, protect our donors. Behind Sterling, the assistant returned with the tablet held like a shield. His fingers shook slightly as he scrolled. "Sir," he murmured, "the log shows—" Dean lifted one finger, cutting him off without even turning his head. "I'll need you to stop recording," Dean said to no one in particular. The assistant froze, startled. Sterling's eyes narrowed. "We're not recording," Sterling said. Dean's gaze shifted to the guard, then to the second security officer who had arrived quietly, like summoned shadow. "Then we have no problem," Dean replied. "We can proceed with protocol." He nodded toward Lily. The corridor suddenly felt smaller. The officer stepped forward. Lily's breath caught. She tightened her grip on the watch so hard her knuckles went pale. Marla moved without thinking. She stepped in front of Lily, planting her feet like roots. Her folder slid open in her arms, papers peeking out like tired wings. "You're not touching her," Marla said. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It had the sharpness of a mother's kitchen knife, the kind that has cut bread and defended children for decades. Dean's smile thinned. "Ma'am," he said, almost pitying, "I'm trying to help you. You walked into a private event without proper clearance, and now there's an allegation of theft." Lily's head jerked up. "I didn't—" she started. Her voice faltered. The words got stuck in the middle of her throat. She swallowed them down and tried again, smaller. "I didn't take it." The corridor held that sentence for a beat, small, plain, true. Dean tilted his head as if he were listening, as if he cared. Then he looked to Sterling. "You see," Dean said, "this is exactly why we can't allow this to linger. It becomes messy." Sterling's gaze flicked to Lily's hands, to the cracked lid of the watch, to the chain biting into her skin. His jaw tightened, but he didn't move. Not yet. Dean leaned closer, dropping his voice like a secret offered in kindness. "Let me handle it," he said. "We'll escort them out, quietly. No scandal, no headlines." Sterling's eyes stayed steady. Dean continued, pressing the blade deeper. "You have a board full of people who expect you to keep things clean. Your name on that donor wall means something. Your signature on tonight's pledge means everything." Sterling's assistant shifted behind him again, uneasy. "Sir," he whispered, "they're asking where you are. The MC—" Sterling didn't answer. His eyes stayed on Lily, but his body angled slightly toward the ballroom doors. A man split clean down the middle, one half pulled by reputation, one half pinned to the floor by a child holding a broken watch. Dean saw the angle, and Dean took advantage. He turned to the officers. "Proceed," he said. The first officer stepped forward. Marla lifted her folder like it was a weapon. "Wait!" she snapped. Paper fluttered. She pulled a document free with shaking hands and thrust it forward. "This is her invitation," she said, voice urgent. "This is her scholarship certificate. She's supposed to be here." Dean barely glanced at it. He didn't touch it. He didn't need to. "That doesn't look official," he said smoothly. "And even if it were, it would have been verified through our system." He shrugged, a tiny gesture. "As I said," he added, "it's not in the registry." Marla's breath hitched. Her eyes flashed. "It was in the registry," she said. "We checked. We came because we were told to come." Dean's gaze slid to Lily, then back to Marla. "And who told you?" he asked. Marla hesitated. Because the truth was complicated. Because the truth was always complicated for people who lived with less. She had gotten the call through a community center. A letter passed from hand to hand, a promise that had felt like a miracle. Dean's lips curved. "Exactly," he said softly. He leaned closer again, voice dropping into something that sounded gentle, but wasn't. "Do you know what happens when a child is involved in an allegation like this?" he asked, as if he were educating her. Marla stiffened. Dean continued, calm as paperwork. "Sometimes," he said, "authorities decide the child's environment needs evaluation." Marla's face drained. Lily's eyes widened. Her fingers clenched around the watch so hard, the chain squeaked. Marla's hand flew behind her, grabbing Lily's wrist, pulling her closer. "You wouldn't," Marla whispered. Dean held her gaze. "I don't make the rules," he said. "I just know how to use them." The officers took another step. Sterling's assistant sucked in a breath. Sterling's fingers twitched near his own watch again. A reflex, a habit, a wall. Dean turned slightly, speaking over his shoulder to the nearest officer. "Call it in," he said. "Say we have a minor and a guardian refusing to comply. Request a unit. Just to document." The officer reached for his radio. The click sounded loud in that corridor. Lily flinched at it like it was a gunshot. She didn't cry, not out loud. But her shoulders rose, small and tight, trying to make her body smaller than it already was. Marla's voice cracked once. "Please," she said, the word slipping out before she could stop it. She hated the sound of it. She hated needing it. Dean's face softened, almost theatrically. "I'm trying to spare you," he murmured. "If you cooperate now, this ends quietly. If not, I can't control what the system does." Sterling's eyes shifted, not to Dean, to the radio, to Lily, to the watch, to the chain cutting into her skin. For a moment, he looked like he was about to speak. Then he didn't. He glanced toward the ballroom doors again. The muffled sound of applause seeped under the door like water. A reminder, a pressure, a countdown. Dean watched Sterling's hesitation with satisfaction. He stepped closer to Lily, careful to keep his voice soft, like a teacher kneeling to talk to a child. "Sweetheart," Dean said, "just hand the watch to security and go home. This isn't your place." Lily's chin lifted, a tiny flame. She hugged the watch to her chest. "It is mine," she whispered. Dean's smile vanished again. For 1 second, the mask slipped. A glimpse of annoyance, sharp and ugly. Then it was gone, replaced with calm, the calm of a man who knew he could crush people without raising his hand. He straightened and looked at Sterling. "If you want to play hero," Dean said, "I'll need to file a report. That report will include your involvement. It will include your interference. It will become public record." Sterling's face didn't change, but his throat moved. He swallowed. Once. Hard. Marla turned to Sterling, her eyes pleading without begging. "You saw it," she said quietly. "You saw something." Sterling didn't answer, because answering would mean stepping into a fire he'd spent his whole life avoiding. Dean exhaled through his nose, impatient now. "Enough," he said. He nodded to the officers. One officer reached toward Lily's wrist, not harsh, just certain, like he was taking a lost item from a child. Lily jerked back. The watch slipped. The chain snagged. For a heartbeat, time stopped. The cracked lid swung open as it fell, flashing the inside to the corridor light. Sterling saw it again, the engraving, the frozen hands, the half-moon gouge, and something else. A tiny maker's mark on the inner rim. A mark Sterling hadn't noticed the first time. A mark he hadn't seen in years. His fingers moved before he decided to. He reached out and caught the watch mid-fall. His palm closed around it like he was catching a piece of glass. The officer's hand froze in the air. Dean's eyes narrowed. Sterling stared at the tiny mark, his breathing shallow. The corridor felt like it was tilting. Because that mark wasn't just familiar, it was impossible. It was the signature of a watchmaker Sterling's father had trusted with only one thing, only one repair, only one night. Sterling's hand lifted slightly. His voice came out quieter than anyone expected. "Stop," he said. Not to Dean, not to the officers, to the moment itself, to whatever had been chasing him for years and had finally found him in a service corridor that smelled like bleach. Dean's smile returned, slow and dangerous. And then Dean did something small that told Sterling everything. Dean glanced, just briefly, toward the exit door, like he had planned this. Like he wanted them out before the footage arrived, before the papers could be read, before Sterling could connect the dots. Sterling looked up at Dean, and in Sterling's eyes something shifted. Not anger, not yet. Something colder, a decision forming. Dean's voice stayed smooth. "Mr. Blackwood," he said, "we can still make this easy." Sterling didn't blink. He turned slightly toward his assistant. "Get me the footage," he said. "Now!" Then he looked back at Dean, and his voice dropped into a calm that made the corridor feel like a courtroom. "And nobody touches the child again." Dean held Sterling's gaze. Then, very slowly, Dean's lips curved. "As you wish," he said. But his eyes said something else. "Then I'll destroy you a different way." Sterling didn't move at first, not because he was calm, because something inside him had jammed, like a gear that had always turned on autopilot until it suddenly hit resistance. The watch rested in his palm, small, heavy, cold. The cracked lid pressed into the line of his hand. The chain hung from his fingers like a thin accusation. Behind him, the ballroom kept breathing, laughing, clinking, applauding, a world of soft music and expensive perfume. But in the corridor, the air felt sharper, cleaner, colder, as if someone had turned the temperature down just to see who would shiver. Dean stood with his hands gently folded in front of him, like a man waiting for a mistake. The officers hovered, trained to obey the person with the right tone. Marla kept Lily behind her, one hand gripping the girl's wrist, the other clutching the folder so tightly the corners bent. Lily's eyes stayed locked on Sterling's hand, on the watch. On the way, a stranger in a tailored suit was holding it like it could cut him. Sterling's thumb moved across the inner rim, slow, careful. He followed the tiny maker's mark again, a crescent and star stamp, smaller than a fingernail, tucked where most people would never look. His breathing thinned. And suddenly, he wasn't in the corridor anymore. He was in a different place, a darker place, a place that smelled like oil and metal and old tobacco. He saw a workbench under a yellow light. He saw a watch laid open like a heart. He saw his father's hands, steady and cruelly gentle, placing that exact watch on the counter. He heard his father's voice, quiet and absolute. "This stays between us." Sterling's jaw tightened. His knuckles went white. Not because of anger, because he was holding back the flood. He lifted his eyes to Dean. Dean's smile didn't falter. "I'm glad we're being reasonable," Dean said softly. "We can put that back into safe custody. We can escort them out. We can move on." Sterling didn't answer. His gaze dropped again. Inside the watch, beneath the cracked crystal, the hands were frozen at the same time, a time that meant nothing to anyone else. But Sterling felt it land in his chest like a stone. He turned the watch slightly, angling it toward the corridor light, and there it was. A second detail, even smaller. A thin scratch shaped like a half moon etched into the inner lid, not random, not wear and tear, a scar. Sterling's throat worked, once, hard. Marla watched him like she was watching a door that might open. Lily made a small sound, barely there. Not a sob. More like a breath caught on a thorn. Sterling's fingers shifted, and then his hand moved toward his suit jacket. Not fast, not dramatic. He reached into the inner pocket and pulled out a pen, a luxury fountain pen, heavy enough to feel like authority. The cap clicked softly. The sound was precise, cold, controlled. It echoed down the corridor, louder than it should have been. Dean's eyes flicked to the pen, then back to Sterling's face. Sterling looked down at the pen in his hand, a tool he'd used 1,000 times. A tool that had ended deals, signed orders, changed lives without him ever stepping into the lives he changed. The pen felt heavier now. He raised it slightly as if to sign something, the way he always did, the way he was expected to. Then he stopped. The pen hovered in the air. His hand froze, not because he couldn't move, because for the first time in years, his body refused to obey his training. Silence filled the corridor. It wasn't empty silence. It was the kind of silence that presses against the ears, that makes people swallow, that makes security officers glance at each other, waiting for the cue. Sterling's eyes stayed on the watch. His voice came out low, barely a sound. "Where did she get this?" Dean blinked once, a fraction too slow. Then his smile widened as if this were an inconvenience he could charm away. "I'm sure she found it," Dean said, "or it was given to her. Children pick up things. They don't always understand." "That's not an answer." Sterling's tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. The air shifted anyway. Dean's smile thinned again. Marla lifted her chin. "It was my daughter's," she said, voice careful. "Lily's mother. She left it with us." Dean's head angled toward her with polite disdain. "Ma'am," he said, "you're making this worse." Sterling didn't look at Dean. He looked at Marla. "Your daughter," he said. "What's her name?" Marla hesitated. Not because she wanted to lie, because names were dangerous. Names were how people found you. Names were how the world came back for what you tried to protect. Lily's small hand slipped from behind Marla's coat and reached toward the watch in Sterling's palm, not grabbing, not demanding, just reaching, like it belonged to her breath. Sterling's eyes flicked to the child's fingers, small nails, chapped skin, a faint line where the chain had bitten earlier. He lowered the watch, slowly, so Lily could see it, not giving it back yet, just letting her know he wasn't going to drop it, that he wasn't going to let it break again. Lily's whisper came out thin. "My mom called it June's," she said. The corridor went still. Dean's eyes narrowed sharply. Marla's head snapped toward Lily, a warning she didn't have time to speak. Sterling's face didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted, like a door unlocking. June. That name hadn't been spoken in his presence in a long time. Not out loud. Not by anyone who didn't know. His fingers tightened around the watch until the metal pressed into his skin. His voice dropped. "Who told you that name?" Lily blinked fast. Her lip trembled. She didn't cry. She swallowed. "My mom," she whispered. "She said I had to keep it safe. She said it was important." Sterling stared at the watch again. That maker's mark, that half-moon scratch, the frozen hands, and now, the name. Dean stepped forward quickly, a little too quickly. "That's enough," he said, voice still polite, but the edge cutting through. "This is inappropriate. We are done here." Sterling didn't move. Dean turned to the officers. "Take them out," he ordered. "Now!" The officer lifted his radio again. Marla's body tightened, preparing to shield Lily. Sterling's pin hand lowered. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He turned slightly to his assistant. "Lock the doors," he said. The assistant stared at him, confused. Sterling's gaze didn't waver. "Do it," he repeated. "Now." The assistant moved, fast. He pulled out his phone, tapping with shaking fingers. A moment later, the heavy corridor doors at both ends clicked. Not loud, just final. Dean's eyes widened, just a fraction. "That's unnecessary," Dean said smoothly. "You're escalating. You're making a spectacle." Sterling lifted his eyes to Dean, and in them there was no warmth, no charm, no indulgence, just clarity. "I'm ending it," Sterling said. Dean's smile returned, forced now. "You're emotional," Dean murmured. "You're projecting. You don't want your name tied to—" Sterling's head tilted slightly. "And yet," he said, "you were ready to tie my name to a police report." Dean's jaw tightened. Sterling turned to his assistant again. "Get me the footage," he said. "From the entrance, the service corridor, every camera that captured this." The assistant nodded, already moving. Dean took one step back, recalculating. "Mr. Blackwood," he said, voice softening, "I'm trying to protect you from embarrassment. These people, Sterling cut in, still quiet, are a child and her guardian." He shifted his stance, not aggressive, protective. His body angled subtly between Lily and the officers. A wall made of tailored fabric and willpower. Marla saw it. She didn't relax, but she breathed again. Lily looked up at Sterling. Her eyes didn't beg. They studied him, like a child trying to decide if an adult is safe. Sterling glanced down at her. His voice dropped, lower than anyone else could hear. "You said your mother told you to keep it safe," he murmured. Lily nodded once. "Yes." Sterling swallowed. His thumb brushed the crack in the crystal. A gentle touch, not a rich man's gesture, a human one. He lifted his gaze to Dean again. "And you," Sterling said, "wanted it gone." Dean's smile disappeared. For the first time, the mask didn't slip. It fell, just for a second, a flash of panic, then it was back. "Don't be ridiculous," Dean said. "We're simply maintaining security." Sterling turned his head slightly toward the ballroom. The applause swelled again. The MC's voice floated faintly through the door. The event was waiting for him. The world was waiting for him to play his role. Sterling looked at the pen in his hand. Then he looked at the watch. Then he looked at Lily. His grip tightened, then loosened, as if he were forcing himself to choose carefully. He opened his palm and set the pen against the wall's small ledge. Not dramatically, just placing it down. A decision, a line drawn. He reached into his inner pocket again and pulled out his phone. The screen lit his face in a pale glow. He didn't dial. He tapped one number, a contact he hadn't used in years. The name displayed was simple. No last name, just one word. Home. Sterling stared at it for a beat. His thumb hovered over it. He could feel Dean watching. He could feel the weight of his reputation behind him. He could feel Lily's breath near his hand. He pressed call. The phone rang once, twice. Sterling's eyes didn't blink. Dean's voice sharpened. "What are you doing?" Sterling didn't answer. The line picked up. A voice came through, calm and older. "Sterling?" Sterling closed his eyes for half a second. Like the sound had punched through his ribs. His voice came out low. "I need you to listen," he said. "It's about June." Silence on the other end. The corridor felt like it stopped breathing. Marla's fingers tightened around her folder. Lily's eyes widened. Dean's face changed, just slightly, but enough. Sterling saw it. That was the moment he knew, not just that the watch was real, not just that June was connected, but that Dean was afraid of what Sterling was about to uncover. Sterling lowered the phone a fraction, keeping the line open, and looked straight at Dean. "You tried to erase her," Sterling said softly. Dean's smile trembled. He lifted his chin. "I don't know what you think you know," he said, "but I suggest you end this, now." Sterling's gaze didn't move. The assistant returned, breathless, holding the tablet out like evidence. "Sir," he whispered, "I have the entrance feed, and there's something else." Sterling's eyes flicked to the screen. The video showed the entrance, Lily, Marla, the guards, and then, in the corner of the frame, Dean, his hand moving, not toward security, toward the registry clipboard, toward a folder, toward something that looked like he was removing a page. Sterling's jaw tightened. His voice went even quieter. "Play it again," he said. Dean took a step forward. "Stop," he snapped, the first crack in his composure. Sterling didn't look away from the screen. The corridor filled with the sound of a video replaying. Small, electronic, unforgiving. And on the second viewing, it was unmistakable. Dean wasn't protecting anyone. He was covering something up. Sterling stared at the evidence. Then he looked at Lily again, at the watch, at the chain, at the child who had walked into a world of marble and glass with nothing but dignity and a broken piece of time. His voice dropped into the kind of calm that made grown men step back. "Dean," he said, "you're done." Dean's smile was gone now. His eyes hardened. "You don't have the authority to—" Sterling turned slightly, lifting his phone again so the person on the other line could hear every word. "I do," Sterling said. "And if I don't, I will." He looked down at Lily one more time. Not as a donor, not as a chairman, as a man who had just realized something terrible was still alive. His next words were soft, but they landed like iron. "Whose child are you?" he asked almost to himself. Lily swallowed. Her voice came out small. "Mine," she said, holding the watch tight to her chest again. "I'm my mom's." Sterling's eyes stayed on her. And in that silence, the macro loop opened wider than ever. Because Sterling wasn't just seeing a stolen watch anymore. He was seeing a missing sister, a mother who ran, a child who carried the truth like a secret in her pocket. And for the first time all night, Sterling Blackwood stopped being a spectator. The corridor didn't feel like a hallway anymore. It felt like a courtroom built out of marble and cold air. The ballroom doors stayed shut behind them, muffling laughter into something distant and cruel like joy happening in another universe. Sterling kept the watch in his hand, not as proof, as a promise. Lily stood close to Marla, her small fingers wrapped around the chain now, as if she needed to feel it to believe it still existed. Dean's posture hardened. His voice lost the soft polish. "Open the doors," he snapped to Sterling's assistant. "Right now." The assistant didn't move. He looked at Sterling instead, waiting for the real authority. Sterling's gaze stayed on Dean. "Your concern," Sterling said quietly, "is touching." Dean's nostrils flared. "You're putting the entire foundation at risk," he hissed. "Donors are inside. Media is inside. If you keep them locked out, you create panic." Sterling's eyes didn't blink. "You already created panic," he said. "You just hid it behind procedure." Dean stepped closer, lowering his voice again, trying to make it private, trying to make it controllable. "You're not thinking clearly," he said. "This is a child. She's confused. That watch could be from anywhere, and you're about to blow up your own event over a story you want to believe. Sterling's thumb brushed the crack in the crystal again, slow, like he was tracing a wound. Then he lifted the watch a fraction higher, letting the corridor light catch it. "I'm not blowing up an event," Sterling said. "I'm stopping a lie." Dean's eyes flicked to Lily. For a fraction of a second, he didn't look at her as a person. He looked at her like a loose thread. Something that, if pulled, could unravel everything. He turned sharply and spoke into his own phone. Fast. Low. "Get the board," he said. "Now. Tell them Sterling is unstable. Tell them he's having a personal episode." Marla's face tightened at the word episode. Lily's grip on the chain tightened too, the thin metal pressing into her skin. Sterling watched Dean make the call, and he didn't interrupt. Not yet. He stood there, tall and still, like a man letting the other person dig the hole deeper. Then the sound came. Not inside. Outside. Footsteps. Quick. Heavy. Rubber soles on polished floor, a radio crackling, a set of keys clinking. Lily's shoulders rose toward her ears like she was bracing against the world. Marla shifted, stepping in front of Lily without thinking. A wall made of grandmother bones and stubborn love. Two uniformed officers appeared at the end of the corridor, followed by a head of security with a headset and a face trained to be neutral. "Sir," the head of security said, eyes flicking between Sterling and Dean, "we received a report. Possible theft. Possible disturbance." Dean's tone slid back into polite concern. "Thank you for coming," he said. "We have an unauthorized minor, suspicious item, and an escalating situation." Sterling's assistant started to speak, but Sterling lifted his hand slightly. A small motion, but it stopped the room. Sterling stepped forward just enough to be seen as the center of gravity. "Officer," Sterling said calmly, "there is no theft." Dean's jaw tightened. "The watch was stolen," he insisted. "We have reason to believe—" Sterling turned the tablet slightly toward the officers, not shoving it, just presenting it. "Run the footage," he said. Dean's eyes snapped to the tablet. "Absolutely not," he said, voice tightening. "That footage is private property of the institution." Sterling's gaze cut through him. "Then why did you tamper with the registry?" Sterling said softly. "In front of a camera you claim is private?" The head of security blinked. One of the officers leaned closer, eyes narrowing at the screen. Dean took a step forward. His hand lifted slightly as if he might grab the device. Sterling's assistant pulled it back a half step. Dean's composure cracked again. "Sterling," he warned through his teeth, "you don't understand what you're doing." Sterling didn't answer that. He looked down at Lily instead. Her chin was lifted. Her mouth was pressed into a thin line, the way children do when they're trying not to fall apart in front of strangers. The chain trembled faintly between her fingers. Sterling's throat moved. He swallowed. Hard. Then he turned his head slightly toward Marla. "You said your daughter gave her this," he murmured. Marla nodded once. Her eyes were shining, but she held herself still. "She told me," Marla said quietly, "if anything ever happened, if anyone ever tried to take it, I was supposed to protect it like I was protecting her." Dean scoffed. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "Listen to yourself. You're in a hallway at a gala turning a charity event into a soap opera." Sterling's gaze didn't leave Marla. "What's your daughter's name?" he asked again. Marla hesitated. Lily's eyes flicked to her grandmother. A silent plea. Marla's fingers tightened around the folder. "Her name," Marla said, voice low, "isn't something I say in places like this." Dean's smile turned sharp. "There it is," he said to the officers. "Evasion. They can't even keep their story straight." The officers exchanged a glance. The head of security shifted his weight, uncomfortable. Sterling felt the eyes on him, not just in the corridor, in the building, in the foundation, in the invisible world of reputation that had always obeyed him. He could feel it like a hand on the back of his neck. And then, like a cold wind, the board arrived. 3 men in suits, 1 woman in a structured dress, all carrying the posture of people used to being listened to. They came fast, not running, but urgent. The woman, Carol Whitman, chair of the board, spoke first. "Sterling," she said, trying to sound calm, "we received a call. What is happening?" Dean stepped in immediately. "He's had a personal trigger," Dean said smoothly. "He's locking down doors. He's interfering with security. He's being manipulated." Sterling's assistant opened his mouth to protest. Sterling lifted his hand again, that same quiet command. Carol's eyes went to the watch in Sterling's hand. Her gaze lingered on it longer than it should have. Then her eyes flicked to Lily. To Marla's protective stance. Carol's mouth tightened. "This is a gala," she said carefully. "Not a courtroom." Sterling's shoulders rose with a slow breath. The old Sterling wanted to end this quickly, cleanly. He could. 1 sentence, 1 check, 1 apology to the board. He could have Marla escorted out and have Lily sent home. He could shove the watch into a safe. He could let Dean handle it. He could return to the ballroom, smile, sign, donate, move on. The old Sterling could already feel how easy it would be, how smooth the slide back into control. He felt his fingers tighten around the pin that wasn't there anymore. He glanced at the ledge where he had set it down. The pin was still there, waiting, like it always waited. Waiting to do what it was designed to do, end the discomfort, close the problem. Sterling's gaze stayed on that pin for a beat too long, and Lily noticed. Children always notice. She didn't speak. She didn't tug his sleeve. She didn't ask him to save her. She just stood there, holding the chain, her small shoulders pulled tight, watching a grown man decide what kind of man he was. Sterling's chest tightened. He shifted his weight back. Just half a step. A retreat so small, no one would call it cowardice. But it was enough. Marla's breath caught. Dean's mouth twitched, the beginning of victory. Carol leaned in, voice lowering. "Sterling," she said, "don't do this here. We can review it privately. We can—" "Privately," Sterling repeated softly. He looked at her, at the board, at the officers, at Dean's calm face, at Lily. And suddenly, he saw the whole machine. How it worked. How it always worked. It didn't punish cruelty. It punished inconvenience. It didn't protect innocence. It protected the illusion that everything was fine. Sterling's jaw flexed. He let out a breath. Not a sigh. Something sharper. He reached down and picked up the pen from the ledge. Dean's eyes brightened, relieved. "There it is," Dean seemed to say without words. "He's coming back." Sterling held the pen for a moment. Then, with the same quiet control, he placed it back down. Not because he didn't need it, because he was done being ruled by it. The corridor went still again. Sterling turned his head to his assistant. "Call our compliance officer," he said. Dean's smile froze. Sterling's voice stayed calm. "And call an external auditor tonight." Carol's eyes widened. "Sterling." Sterling lifted the tablet, turning it toward the board. "The footage shows tampering," he said. "You can watch it, or you can pretend you didn't see it. But if you pretend, you become part of it." Dean's lips parted, then closed again. He shifted his gaze to the officers quickly. "This is absurd," he said. He's threatening the foundation. He's making reckless accusations without evidence. Remove them. Remove him if you have to." The head of security hesitated. Carol's face tightened. "Sterling," she warned, "you are not acting in the best interest of the institution." Sterling's eyes flicked to Lily again, then to Marla, then back to Carol. "The institution," Sterling said quietly, "was built to help children." Dean's voice cut in sharply. "And look at the mess he's making because of one child." Sterling's gaze hardened. "One child," he repeated. His voice didn't rise, but it carried. "One child is not a mess." He took a half step forward, not toward Dean, toward Lily. He lowered his body slightly, not fully crouching, but enough that his height wasn't a weapon. He held the watch out gently. Lily's fingers hovered. She didn't grab it. She looked at his hand first, then at his face. Sterling's voice softened. "Take it," he murmured. "I won't let anyone touch it." Lily reached out and took the watch with both hands. Her fingers trembled. Then she pulled it to her chest, like a shield. Sterling rose again, and when he turned back to the board and the officers, his stance had changed. He wasn't an offended donor. He wasn't a chairman protecting an image. He was a man standing in front of a child who had no other power than truth. The head of security cleared his throat. "Sir," he said, looking at Dean, "if there's footage of tampering, we need to review it." Dean's eyes flashed with anger. "You're not going to question me," he snapped. The officer's radio crackled again. Another voice said something Sterling couldn't hear clearly. But Sterling saw Dean's attention flick toward the ballroom, toward the doors, toward the possibility of witnesses. Dean's hand twitched toward his phone again. Sterling's assistant stepped closer to Sterling's ear. "Sir," he whispered, "we have the footage saved, but Dean's requesting the system override. If he gets it, he can delete it." Sterling's stomach tightened. So that was the move. Erase the proof. Dean's gaze snapped to Sterling as if he sensed the whisper. His voice turned smooth again. "Sterling," he said, "don't do this to yourself." Sterling's phone buzzed in his pocket. Once. Then again. His assistant looked. "Media is asking why the doors are locked," the assistant whispered. The machine was waking up. The headlines were circling. Sterling could feel the old instinct flare. Hide it, control it, shut it down, fix it quietly. And for one terrifying second, he almost reached for the pen again. Almost. Then Lily's small voice cut through the corridor. Not loud, not dramatic, just a child stating a simple truth. "My mom said, if I ever got scared, I should hold it and count," she whispered, clutching the watch, "but it doesn't tick anymore." Sterling's eyes locked on the watch in her hands. A broken timepiece, a child counting silence, and something in him broke in the right direction. He turned to the officers. "Officer," Sterling said, voice steady, "I'm requesting you secure the surveillance system, now, before it's altered." Dean stepped forward. "You can't..." Sterling turned his head toward Dean slowly, and he spoke the next words like a man who understood cost. "Try to delete it," he said softly, "and you will explain to the press why you needed it gone." Dean's face tightened. Carol inhaled sharply. The corridor filled with that heavy silence again. Dean looked around, at the officers, at the board, at the child, at Sterling. And for the first time, Dean didn't look like the man in control. He looked like someone who had been caught mid-act. The head of security lifted his radio. "Lock the system," he ordered. Dean's jaw clenched. His eyes flashed toward Lily one more time, cold and blaming. Sterling shifted again. just a fraction, blocking that look with his body. And now the stakes were clear. It wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. It wasn't a small inconvenience. It was war made out of paperwork and power. And Lily was standing in the middle of it, holding a broken watch that no longer ticked. While every adult around her decided whether truth mattered more than comfort, Sterling didn't move like a man rushing into drama. He moved like a man stepping into weather, slow, certain, the kind of calm that makes everyone else feel loud. The head of security kept his hand near his radio, listening to a voice in his ear. One of the officers shifted position closer to the door that led back to the ballroom, as if anticipating a spill. Dean tried again, more polished. He turned to Carol and the board, palms open, voice measured. "Let's be rational," he said. "We can review whatever Sterling thinks he saw in private. Right now, we have donors and guests waiting. A child and her guardian should be escorted out safely. Quietly. That's all. Quietly." That word landed in Sterling's chest like a nail. He looked at Dean's hands, clean, no tremor, no humanity, just control. Then Sterling looked down at Lily. She stood pressed to Marla's side, the chain wrapped around her fingers, the broken watch held against her sweater like it might keep her heart from falling out. Her gaze was fixed on Sterling's face, not pleading, watching. Sterling turned toward the ballroom doors, the seam between the hallway and the event, between truth and performance. His assistant whispered, barely audible, "Sir, if we open those doors, this becomes public." Sterling's eyes didn't leave the doors. "Yes," he murmured. Dean's expression sharpened. "No," he snapped. "Absolutely not." Sterling reached for the handle, not yanking, not theatrics, just a hand on cold metal. He paused a beat as if feeling the weight of everything he'd protected for years. Then he opened the door. Light poured out, warm, gold, laughing. The kind of light that makes you think nothing bad ever happens. Heads turned, music faltered. A hush rolled across the room, one table at a time, like a wave discovering rocks. Sterling stepped into the doorway. The room saw him first. The billionaire, the chairman, the man who made rooms behave. Behind him, Marla and Lily appeared, small, out of place, courage in worn shoes. A few guests leaned forward, curious. A few stiffened, annoyed. Sterling didn't speak yet. He let the silence do what it was born to do. He lifted his hand slightly to his assistant. "Bring the screen," he said. Dean's voice hissed behind him. "Sterling, don't." Sterling walked forward, just far enough to be seen by everyone. The stage was there. The large screen behind it, usually used for glossy photos of smiling beneficiaries and polished donors. Sterling's name sat on the program. He had been minutes from signing a pledge. Now he stood beneath that same light and refused to play his role. Carol Whitman hurried after him. Her heels clicked in panic. "What are you doing?" she whispered. Sterling didn't turn. His assistant moved quickly, pulling up the system. A few technicians hovered, hands poised. Dean pushed forward, red creeping into his neck. "Stop," he said to the tech. "I'm the event director. You don't have authorization." The tech's eyes flicked to Sterling. Sterling didn't raise his voice. He lowered it. The kind of voice that forces every other sound to kneel. "Play it," he said. The room held its breath. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the screen flickered. A corridor camera view appeared. Grainy. Slightly angled. But clear enough, a timestamp in the corner. No one cared about the timestamp. They cared about the movement. They watched Dean Langford in the hallway earlier that evening, alone. He stood at a desk. He opened a drawer. He removed a folder labeled with the scholarship program seal. He slid a sheet out. Then his hand went to a laptop. His fingers moved fast, deleting, replacing. He looked over his shoulder twice, like a man who knew he was guilty. Then a child's small figure appeared on the camera, down the hall, Lily, walking with Marla. Dean saw them coming. He quickly shut the drawer, shoved the folder back, and stepped into the open space with a smile already built on his face. The room made a sound, not words. A low, collective intake that sounded like disbelief. A donor's wife covered her mouth. Someone at the back whispered, "Oh my God!" Dean's face drained. He stepped forward, forcing a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "This is ridiculous," he said loudly. "That footage proves nothing. You're taking it out of context." Sterling turned slightly, enough to look at him. The light caught Sterling's watch on his wrist, the expensive one, the one he used to adjust whenever anyone mentioned family. His fingers didn't go to it now. They stayed at his side, still. "I'm going to ask one question," Sterling said, voice steady, carrying through the ballroom like a bell. He looked around. He made sure every face was watching, every witness present. Then he looked back at Dean. "Why?" Sterling asked. "Did you change the record so a child would be removed?" Dean's smile twitched. He tried to speak. Nothing came out at first. Sterling didn't fill the silence. He let Dean drown in it. Dean's eyes flicked to the board, to Carol, to the officers visible near the doors, to the guests who had paid for seats and now received something sharper than entertainment. Dean swallowed hard. We have standards," he said finally. "We have protocols. She wasn't—" Sterling lifted a hand, not aggressive. "Final. Stop," he said. The word landed clean. Dean went quiet. Sterling nodded once to his assistant. "Scroll," he said. The footage moved forward. Now the camera view showed Dean at the entrance moments later, with Lily and Marla standing there. Dean's mouth moved, but the audio wasn't captured. Still, everyone could read body language. Dean's hand motioned sharply. Security was called. Marla tried to present papers. Dean waved them away like they were trash. Lily's small hands rose to her chest, clutching something, the watch. Dean leaned down, too close, too controlling. Then he straightened, face composed, and lifted his chin to security with a gesture that said, "Remove them." The room shifted. A ripple of anger, disgust. Not because the rich hadn't seen cruelty before, but because they had been forced to see it clearly. Sterling turned to the board. His voice stayed calm. "There will be an audit," he said. Carol's mouth opened. Sterling didn't wait for permission. "Tonight," he continued. "Not next week. Not after we manage optics. Tonight." Carol's eyes flashed. "You can't unilaterally—" Sterling looked at her fully now. His gaze wasn't hostile. It was tired. A man who had spent years confusing peace with silence. "I can," he said, "and I will." He turned back to Dean. "And effective immediately," Sterling said, "Dean Langford is suspended from all duties related to this foundation and this institution." Dean's voice cracked. "You don't have that authority." Sterling's assistant stepped forward with a tablet, holding it up toward the board, a set of documents, a clause, a signature. Carol's eyes moved over it. Her face tightened. Dean's lips parted, then pressed together. Sterling didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He just kept going, because justice doesn't pause to be polite. Sterling lifted his chin slightly. "Officer," he said, "please escort Mr. Langford to a private office. He will not touch any system, any record, or any employee until compliance arrives." The officer nodded once, Dean backed up instinctively. His hands rose. "Wait!" he said, voice shaking with anger and fear. "This is a mistake. Sterling is doing this because he's emotionally compromised. He's projecting some personal trauma onto—" Sterling walked closer. Not fast, not threatening. Just close enough to make Dean feel small for the first time tonight. The ballroom watched. Witnesses. A jury. Sterling's voice dropped so low the nearest tables leaned in. "You called a child a risk," Sterling said softly. Dean's throat bobbed. Sterling's eyes didn't leave his face. "The only risk," Sterling continued, "is a man who needs children to disappear." Dean's face flushed red. "Don't you dare!" Sterling didn't raise his voice. He made the next sentence quieter, and that quietness made it sharper. "I dare," Sterling said, "because you did it in front of all of us." The officer placed a hand lightly on Dean's arm. Dean jerked away, not violent, proud. He tried to turn to the guests, to recover control. "This is a scandal," he called out. "He's destroying this institution. He's throwing away millions because of—" Sterling lifted his hand again, that same small motion, and his assistant stepped onto the stage. He held up another document. "Mr. Blackwood," the assistant announced, voice firm, "the contract for the Blackwood Development Partnership is ready for signature." The room recognized the name. Blackwood Development. Millions, tens of millions, the kind of money that funds wings of hospitals and scholarships and careers. Dean's eyes flashed with hope again. He seized it. "There," he said, pointing. "Sign it. Do the responsible thing. Stop this madness." Sterling looked at the document. Then he looked at Lily. She stood near the doorway, still clutching the broken watch, her small body stiff with fear and disbelief. Marla held her shoulders, grounding her, like anchoring a boat in a storm. Sterling took one step toward the assistant. He reached out. His fingers touched the pen. The room leaned forward. Dean's lips parted, relief almost visible. Sterling picked up the pen, and then, in the same motion, he set it down. He didn't sign. He didn't even pretend to consider it. He turned to the crowd. His voice carried, steady and plain. "I'm withdrawing," he said. A gasp went through the room. Dean's face contorted. "You can't be serious," he hissed. Sterling looked at him without heat. "I am," he said. Carol Whitman's face tightened, furious. "Sterling!" she snapped. "That partnership funds half our programs." Sterling's eyes didn't flinch. He nodded once, like a man accepting pain. "That money," he said, "will be replaced." He turned slightly toward the donors. "And if the foundation needs funds," Sterling continued, "it will not get them by humiliating children. It will get them by being honest." The room stayed quiet, not because they agreed, because they couldn't argue without revealing themselves. Sterling took a slow breath. Then he did the thing that mattered more than any contract. He walked back toward Lily. The floor between them felt long, like a bridge. Sterling stopped a few feet away, lowering his body into a crouch. Not the elegant kneel from earlier. This was different. This was deliberate. This was surrendering status. He didn't touch Lily. He didn't invade her space. He just brought his face down, closer to her level, so she didn't have to look up at him like he was the sky. His voice turned soft. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Lily's lips trembled. She shook her head once. Then she looked down at the watch. Her fingers tightened around the chain. "My grandma said they were going to take me," she whispered. Sterling's throat moved. He swallowed hard. He took off his suit jacket. Not slowly for drama. Quickly, like a man taking off armor. He draped it over Lily's shoulders. The fabric swallowed her small frame, warm and heavy. Lily froze, startled. Then her hands moved, gripping the lapels as if she didn't know whether she was allowed to hold something like that. Sterling's voice stayed low. "They're not taking you," he said. He glanced up, eyes sweeping over security. Police, board members, over the whole machine. "And if anyone tries," Sterling continued, "they'll have to go through me." Marla's eyes filled. She pressed her lips together, holding herself steady. Because she had spent too many years being told the world doesn't protect people like them, Sterling rose. He turned back toward the crowd again. He didn't make a speech. He didn't seek applause. He said one more sentence, a simple one, the kind that lands because it's true. "This event is over," Sterling said, "but the truth isn't." The officers guided Dean toward the side exit. Dean fought it with posture, not fists. His head held high, but his eyes darted like a man looking for a way out. As he passed Lily, his gaze flicked toward her again, cold, blaming. Sterling shifted instantly, placing himself between that look and the child. Dean's jaw tightened, and then he was gone. The ballroom stayed frozen. People unsure whether to clap, to leave, to pretend they hadn't just witnessed something ugly and undeniable. Sterling turned to Carol. "I'll submit a statement," he said. "You'll cooperate with the audit, and you'll reinstate her scholarship record." Carol's mouth opened. Sterling didn't wait. He turned to his assistant. "Get Marla's documents copied," he said, "and have our legal team meet them at my car." His assistant nodded, already moving. Sterling reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. It vibrated again. Home. He stared at it. For a heartbeat, his thumb hovered over decline. The old habit. The old wall. Then he pressed answer. He didn't speak at first. He just listened. And the room watched his face change in tiny ways, the jaw loosening, the eyes focusing on something that wasn't money. When he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet it barely carried. "I need you," he said into the phone. "I found something." His gaze flicked down to Lily's hands around the broken watch. The chain was still trembling. The watch still didn't tick, but the room had changed, and Sterling Blackwood had changed with it. Not fully, not magically, but enough to make the next part inevitable, because now the question wasn't whether Dean had lied. That was done. Now the question was bigger. Why did that broken watch belong to Sterling's past? And why did it end up in the hands of a child who had been treated like she didn't belong anywhere? Sterling turned slightly toward Lily again. His voice softened. "Hold on to it," he murmured. "Don't let anyone take it from you." Lily nodded once, and the way she nodded, small, careful, trusting, made Sterling's throat tighten again. He looked away quickly, not to hide emotion, to keep control long enough to finish what he started, because the truth was close now, close enough to hurt, close enough to heal. The night didn't end with applause. It ended with chairs scraping back, with murmurs that sounded like expensive discomfort, with donors staring down into their glasses, suddenly unsure where to put their eyes. Sterling didn't wait to be thanked. He guided Lily and Marla out through a side corridor, away from the main doors, away from cameras, away from anything that would turn a child's fear into a headline. The hallway lights were colder here, cleaner, more honest. His assistant walked a few steps behind, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in short sentences to people who moved when Sterling's name was said. Security walked ahead, no longer removing anyone. Now they were clearing a path. At the elevator, Lily hesitated. The doors opened with a soft chime. Sterling stepped inside first, keeping his body angled so she wouldn't feel trapped. Marla stood close, one hand steadying Lily's shoulder. The jacket Sterling had placed over Lily was too big. It hung down past her wrists, the sleeve swallowing her hands, but she kept it on, not because it was expensive, because it was warm, because it meant someone had chosen her over the room. The elevator began to rise. The silence in that small box was different than the ballroom silence. This one wasn't performative. It was a silence where people decide whether they're going to tell the truth. Sterling looked at the watch in Lily's hands. The crack in the glass caught the light, making a thin silver line like a scar. Lily's thumb rubbed the chain again and again, the way a child rubs a blanket edge when she's trying not to shake. Sterling's fingers twitched at his side, not to reach for it, to stop himself from reaching. He cleared his throat, voice low. "Where did you get it?" he asked. Lily's gaze flicked to Marla. Marla answered, careful. "It was her mother's," she said. "It's the only thing she left that never got pawned, never got sold. Lily kept it hidden." Sterling's jaw tightened. "Her mother," he repeated, the words coming out slower than he intended. Marla nodded. "And before that," she added, "it wasn't ours. It was given to her mother." Sterling stared at the watch like it might bite him. The elevator dinged. The doors slid open onto a quieter floor. Sterling led them down a carpeted corridor to a suite, not because he wanted to impress them, because it was away from the noise, because it was safe. Inside, the lighting was soft and warm. A lamp near the couch cast an amber glow on the cream-colored walls. The room smelled faintly like clean linen and coffee that had been poured hours ago and forgotten. Sterling motioned toward the couch. "Sit," he said gently. Marla didn't sit right away. She stood with her hands clasped, looking like a woman who had learned not to relax inside places that didn't belong to her. Lily sat slowly, the jacket still around her shoulders, the watch held against her belly like a secret. Sterling crossed to a sideboard where a bottle of water sat. He poured into a glass. His hand was steady, but his thumb kept pressing the rim of the glass as if testing whether it was real. He carried it to Lily. He didn't place it on the table. He offered it directly, waiting until her small fingers took it. That small exchange landed heavier than the gala. Lily held the glass with both hands. She didn't drink right away. She just stared at the water, as if waiting for someone to say she wasn't allowed. Sterling turned to his assistant. "Call compliance," he said, "and legal, and an independent auditor." His assistant nodded and slipped into the adjoining room. Sterling looked at Marla again. "Your documents?" he said. Marla hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out a worn folder. The edges were softened from use. The papers inside were creased, some stained with the faint rings of old coffee. She handed them to Sterling with the careful dignity of someone handing over a piece of their heart. Sterling accepted them with both hands, not because he was trying to be respectful, because it suddenly felt like something fragile. He laid the folder on the coffee table. He didn't open it yet. Instead, he sat in the chair opposite them, not on the couch, giving them space. The posture of power would have been to sit above them, to hover. Sterling sat low, level. He inhaled, slow. Then he spoke again, voice quiet. "I need to see it," he said. "The inside of the watch." Lily's fingers tightened around it. Her eyes flicked toward Marla again. Marla nodded once, reassuring. Lily held the watch out. Her hands trembled as she offered it, as if she expected the world to take it and never return it. Sterling reached forward slowly. He let his hand pause a few inches away, giving Lily time to pull back if she wanted. She didn't. Sterling took it, The metal was cool. He felt the weight of it settle into his palm like an old memory. He turned it gently, as if it could still bruise. The crack in the glass ran across the face, splitting the numbers. The hands were frozen on an hour that didn't matter anymore. Sterling's thumb brushed the hinge and the lid opened with a faint click. Inside, the engraving was there. Not loud, not obvious. A small line of letters worn down by time. Sterling didn't read it out loud. His throat tightened. He stared. His eyes narrowed as if focusing could change what he was seeing. Then he turned the watch slightly, catching the light. And there it was, on the inner rim. A tiny maker's mark, a symbol used by one old craftsman in Connecticut, someone Sterling's father had trusted because he didn't ask questions. Sterling's fingers went still. His breathing shifted. Once, twice. He tried to swallow and it didn't go smoothly. Marla watched him like she was watching weather change over a field. "You recognize it," she said quietly. Sterling's voice came out thinner than he intended. "Yes," he whispered. Lily's eyes widened. "What does it mean?" she asked. Sterling glanced at her. He didn't answer right away. He looked down at the watch again. Then he closed it carefully and placed it back in Lily's hands. He didn't keep it. He didn't hold it like evidence. He returned it like it was hers. Lily clutched it immediately, pulling it back to her chest. Sterling leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped loosely. The suit shirt sleeves had shifted up slightly. His wrist was bare without the jacket's cuff. More human. "Do you know your mother's real name?" Sterling asked Lily. Lily shrugged, small. "I call her Mom," she said. Marla's lips pressed together. Sterling looked at Marla. "You know," he said softly. Marla's gaze dropped to the folder, then to Lily, then back to Sterling. "I know what she told me," Marla said. "I know what she ran from. I know what she refused to talk about." Sterling's chest rose and fell slowly. "The name," he said again, voice careful. "Was it June?" Marla's face changed. Not dramatically, just the smallest crack. Like a wall discovering it has a weakness. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. She shook her head once, then nodded, then shook her head again. Conflicted. "She called herself Anna," Marla said. "For years, on papers, on school forms." Sterling's jaw clenched. "That's not her name," he murmured. Marla's voice lowered. "She said it used to be," Marla whispered. "June." Sterling's eyes shut for a second. His head dipped, not collapsing, just bowing. When his eyes opened again, they were fixed on Lily. Lily stared back, clutching the watch, the jacket still around her shoulders. "You look like you know her," Lily said very quietly. Sterling's hands tightened together for a moment, knuckles whitening, then loosened again. "I knew someone," he said. "A long time ago." He didn't say sister yet. He didn't say blood. He didn't turn it into a speech. He spoke like a man trying not to scare a child. He pointed gently toward the watch. "That belonged to her," Sterling said. Lily's brow furrowed. "My mom said it was from a man who fixed watches," she whispered. "She said she kept it because it was the only proof she wasn't crazy." Sterling's eyes flicked to Marla. Marla nodded faintly. "She said she left because she had to," Marla said. "She didn't want to leave, but she had to." Sterling's throat moved. He stared at the carpet for a moment as if the pattern could hold him up. "Why didn't she come back?" he asked. Marla's voice broke on the first word, then steadied. "Because she was afraid," she said. "Not of you, of your father." Sterling's face went still. Lily's eyes darted between them. "Who's his father?" Lily asked. Marla gently touched Lily's knee. Not a safe man, she said. Not back then. Sterling exhaled slowly, the old sound of a house too quiet, of a door closing, of a man's footsteps that meant trouble. He looked up. I was supposed to protect her, he said, not as a dramatic confession, but like a sentence he had carried in his bones for years. His fingers found his wrist again out of habit, reaching for the watch he always adjusted. Then he remembered, and his hand dropped. Lily's voice was small. My mom, Lily started. She stopped, her lips pressed together. She looked down at the broken watch and whispered the rest. She said nobody believes girls who say they're scared. Sterling's chest tightened. He stared at Lily for a long moment. Then he turned his head slightly, looking away, not to avoid her, but to regain control. When he looked back, he spoke quietly. I believe her, he said. Marla's shoulders sagged, just a fraction. The sound in the room shifted, like a storm finally stepping back from the window. Sterling reached toward the folder. He opened it carefully. The top page was a scholarship certificate draft, a letterhead. Not legible in detail, but enough to show it was real. Below that, a copy of a birth certificate, a changed last name, a blank space where a father's name would have been, then a letter. Old, handwritten. The ink slightly faded. Sterling's fingers hovered over it. He didn't rip it open. He slid it out with the same care he'd used with the watch. He read the first line. His face went pale. Marla's eyes watched him. She left that with you? Sterling asked. Marla nodded. She wrote it for you, Marla said, but she never sent it. She gave it to me and made me swear. If anything ever happened, if Lily ever needed a door that wouldn't slam in her face, I would find you. Sterling's breath caught. He kept reading. His lips moved slightly, silently, as the words landed. His eyes glistened, but he didn't let them spill. Not yet. He lowered the letter to his lap. Then he looked at Lily. You came to the gala, Sterling said softly, because you were supposed to be honored. Lily's eyes widened. They said I wasn't on the list, she whispered. Sterling nodded, jaw tight. You were, he said. Someone removed you. Lily's fingers tightened around the watch again. Marla's voice was steady. She worked so hard, Marla said. She studied. She didn't ask for anything. She just wanted one night where she didn't feel invisible. Sterling's gaze dropped to the jacket around Lily's shoulders, his jacket, a symbol of a world that had pushed her away. He stood abruptly, not angry at them, angry at himself. He walked to the window and stared out at the city lights. Then he turned back. His voice stayed low, but it carried weight. I'm going to fix this, he said. Marla's eyes narrowed. Fix how? She asked, cautious. With money? Sterling's gaze held hers. No, he said. He walked back to the couch. He didn't stand over them. He crouched again, low status, voluntary. He looked at Lily. First, he said, you're going to get sleep, somewhere safe, tonight. Lily blinked. She looked exhausted now that the adrenaline had drained. Sterling turned to Marla. You'll stay here, he said. Both of you. Marla shook her head immediately. We can't, she said. We don't. Sterling lifted his hand gently. No, he said. Not as charity, as protection, as a choice I should have made earlier. Marla's lips trembled. She tried to hold it back. Sterling stood and walked to a small desk, pulling out a notepad. He wrote with quick, clean strokes. His assistant re-entered the room. Compliance is on their way, the assistant said. Legal too, and the auditor you requested. Sterling nodded. He handed the note to his assistant. Get a car, he said. and call the only watchmaker still working on Elm Street, the one who apprenticed under Harold Minton. His assistant's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Yes, sir," he said. Sterling turned back to Lily. "You said it doesn't work," he murmured, nodding toward the watch. Lily nodded quickly. "It stopped a long time ago," she whispered. Sterling crouched again, keeping his voice gentle. "Would you let me try to get it working?" he asked. Lily hesitated. Her fingers tightened. Then she nodded once, slow, trusting. Sterling didn't take the watch from her again. He simply placed his palm under it, and Lily set it into his hand by choice. That choice mattered. Sterling stood. He turned to Marla. "And second," he said, "tomorrow, you're going to tell me where June is." Marla's eyes filled. "She's not—" Marla started. She stopped. She pressed her fingers to her lips like she was holding back a dam. "She's alive," Marla whispered. "But she's afraid." Sterling's face tightened. "Tell her," he said, voice shaking at the edges, "she doesn't have to be afraid of me anymore." Marla nodded, tears finally slipping down her cheeks. Lily watched Marla cry, startled. She leaned closer, small hands patting the sleeve of Sterling's jacket around her shoulders, as if trying to comfort an adult the way children do. Sterling looked at Lily's hands, then at the broken watch in his own palm. He swallowed hard. His voice dropped. "I'm sorry," he said. It wasn't loud. It wasn't polished. It wasn't a speech. It was a sentence he should have said years ago. "I'm sorry I didn't see you," Sterling whispered. Lily's eyes widened. "Shmi?" she asked. Sterling nodded. "You," he said, "tonight, at the door." Lily stared at him for a moment, confused, then thoughtful. Then she said very quietly, "Sometimes grown-ups don't see kids." Sterling's throat tightened. He nodded once, and the way he nodded looked like surrender. The assistant returned with the car ready. Sterling gathered his coat and tie from the chair, then stopped. He left the tie. He loosened the collar. He looked more like a man than a brand. He offered Marla a hand to stand. She took it. Not because she couldn't stand, because she needed to feel just once what it was like when someone strong helped without humiliating. Sterling walked them to the private elevator. Down, out a side entrance. The city air hit them like cold water. Lily clutched the jacket around her shoulders. Marla kept one arm around Lily's back. Sterling stood on the curb, holding the watch like it was sacred. The driver opened the door. Sterling paused, looking at Lily. "Do you like pancakes?" he asked suddenly. Lily blinked, surprised. "Yes," she whispered. Sterling nodded. "Tomorrow morning," he said. "Pancakes." He didn't promise mansions. He didn't promise miracles. He promised time. The car door closed. The car pulled away. Sterling stood in the cold a moment longer than necessary, watching the taillights fade. Then he turned. And for the first time in years, he didn't adjust his own watch. He held the broken one tighter, like he was finally ready to learn how to repair what mattered. Morning came in soft, winter light. Not the kind that floods a room and announces itself. The kind that slips in quietly, like it's asking permission. Sterling sat in a booth at a small diner 2 streets from the hotel, sleeves rolled to his forearms, collar open, hands wrapped around a plain mug of coffee that had already cooled once. Across from him, Lily sat with Sterling's jacket folded beside her like a blanket she didn't want to lose. Marla kept her purse on her lap, fingers resting over the zipper as if she still expected someone to demand proof of her right to be there. A waitress set down a plate of pancakes. The syrup bottle made a small, sticky sound against the tabletop. Lily stared, not at the food, at the idea of food that wasn't defended. Sterling slid the plate closer to her, slow. He didn't push it like a favor, he placed it like it was already hers. Lily lifted the fork and pressed it into the pancake. The surface gave easily. Steam rose. She took a bite, chewed, swallowed. Her shoulders lowered, just a little, like her body was finally letting go of last night's grip. Sterling watched that one small change the way some men watch stock numbers, like it mattered. Marla's phone buzzed once. She flinched. Then she looked down. A text. No name saved, just a number. Her fingers hovered, trembling. Then she turned the screen so Sterling could see. "Where are you?" it read. Marla swallowed hard. "She's awake," Marla said, voice low. Sterling's jaw tightened. His hand moved to his coffee mug, thumb rubbing the rim once, twice. He didn't tell Marla what to do. He didn't command. He simply spoke like a man trying to build something safer than fear. "Tell her," he said. "We're at the diner on Maple." Marla's fingers shook as she typed. Lily looked up, syrup on the corner of her mouth. "My mom?" she whispered. Marla nodded. Lily froze. Then she took another bite anyway, chewing like she didn't want to stop functioning. Sterling reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out the broken pocket watch, wrapped in a clean handkerchief. He set it on the table without opening it. The crack in the glass caught the diner light, the scar bright and honest. Lily's gaze snapped to it. Her hand lifted halfway, then stopped, like she was afraid to touch it and feel it still broken. Sterling slid it closer. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said quietly. Lily's fingers closed around the watch and she pressed it to her chest again, the familiar move returning like muscle memory. Outside, the street was awake now. Cars hissed over wet asphalt. A bus sighed at a stoplight. People walked fast with collars up, heads down. Sterling looked at the window, then back at Lily. "When you said it was your mother's," he murmured, "I believed you." Lily didn't answer. She just stared at him, serious, like kids get when they're deciding whether a grown-up is safe. Sterling's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. His assistant. He didn't ignore it this time. He answered. His voice stayed low, controlled. "Tell me." He listened. His eyes narrowed slightly. A pause. Then his jaw tightened. "Remove him," Sterling said quietly. Another pause. "Today," he added. "Not pending. Today." He ended the call and set the phone down face up, like he wasn't hiding behind it anymore. Marla's brows lifted. Sterling didn't look proud. He looked tired. "Langford is out," he said. "He won't be anywhere near that scholarship fund again." Marla's lips parted, as if she'd expected the world to refuse. Sterling's fingers tapped the table once, an old habit, then stopped. "And the auditor found irregular transfers," he added, "enough to make last night's procedure look like what it was." Lily's voice was small. "Am I still in trouble?" she asked. Sterling leaned forward. He didn't smile too hard. He didn't soften it into something fake. He just made his voice steady. "No," he said. "You're going to be honored." Lily blinked. Her eyes filled, but she didn't let the tears fall. She swallowed instead, hard, as if her throat had become too small. The diner bell chimed. Sterling didn't turn right away. Marla did. Her whole body stiffened. A woman stood just inside the doorway. Coat too thin for the weather, hair tucked under a knit hat pulled low. Her hands were in her pockets, but her shoulders were tense like she was holding her own breath. Her eyes scanned the room, found Lily, found Marla, then found Sterling. The woman stopped moving, like the floor had become ice. Lily slid out of the booth before Marla could stop her. She stood there, small, jacketless, syrup on her lips, watch clutched in both hands. The woman's mouth parted. One hand came out of her pocket. It shook, not waving, reaching. Lily took one step, then another. The woman dropped to her knees, right there on the diner tile, like she didn't care who saw. Her hands lifted, then hovered. Lily walked into them. The woman's arms wrapped around her so carefully it looked like she was afraid Lily might disappear if she held too tight. Lily pressed her face into the woman's coat, breathing fast at first, then slower. Sterling stood. He didn't rush. He didn't intrude. He simply watched, hands at his sides, shoulders squared like he was preparing to carry weight. Marla's eyes were wet now. The woman lifted her head. Her eyes met Sterling's. Sterling's throat moved as he swallowed. He took one step forward, then stopped, keeping distance. June's face had changed from the girl in his memory. More lines now, more caution, but the same gaze, the same way she held her breath when the world got sharp. Sterling's hands clenched once, then opened. June's voice came out rough. "Sterling!" she whispered. He nodded, just once, not to control the moment, to acknowledge it. "I got your letter," Sterling said, and his voice faltered on the last word. June's eyes darted down. "I didn't send it," she murmured. Sterling's lips pressed together. He nodded again. "I know," he said. "I read it anyway." June's jaw trembled. She looked like she wanted to apologize and fight at the same time. Sterling didn't make her do either. He took a slow breath, then he did something that cost him more than money. He lowered himself to one knee, right there, on the diner floor. The billionaire in a rolled-up shirt, kneeling like a man who had finally run out of pride. "I'm sorry," Sterling said quietly. Not as performance, as surrender. June's eyes filled. Her fingers tightened around Lily's back. "You didn't protect me," she whispered. Sterling didn't flinch away. He nodded once, a small motion that looked like it hurt. "No," he said. "I didn't." He swallowed. "And, I let our father turn silence into a rule," he added, voice low. "I kept following it, even last night." June stared at him. Lily clutched the watch tighter. Sterling's gaze dropped to it. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," Sterling said. "I'm asking you to let me do the next right thing." June's lips parted. Her shoulders shook once. Then she whispered, barely audible. "Our father, is he—" Sterling's jaw tightened. "He doesn't have access to you anymore," he said. "Not to her. Not to Marla." He glanced at Marla, then back at June. "I'm filing a restraining order," he said, "and I'm going on record. Publicly." June's eyes narrowed. "That will make headlines," she whispered. Sterling nodded. "Yes," he said, "it will." He rose slowly. He didn't reach for June. He didn't force closeness. He simply looked at Lily. "Your watch," he said softly. "May I?" Lily hesitated. Then she placed the watch in his palm. This time, she didn't look like she thought it would be stolen. Sterling wrapped it back in the handkerchief and held it like a promise. Later that afternoon, a tiny bell chimed again, not at a diner. At an old watch shop with a narrow window and shelves crowded with timepieces that looked like they'd survived wars. A man with magnifying glasses perched on his forehead took the pocket watch from Sterling with hands that didn't shake. He turned it gently, listening. "Been dropped," the watchmaker murmured. He glanced at Lily. "More than once," he added. Lily's fingers twisted together. June stood behind her, one hand on Lily's shoulder, protective without squeezing. Sterling watched the watchmaker's tools come out, small, precise, patient. He didn't pull out his phone. He didn't rush the man. He sat on a wooden chair that creaked under him and waited. For the first time in a long time, Sterling waited like time mattered. The watchmaker clicked the lid closed and started working. Metal touched metal with soft, careful sounds. Lily leaned forward, eyes wide, tracking every movement. Sterling's hands rested on his knees. No tapping, no adjusting, just stillness. When the watchmaker finally set the pocket watch down on a cloth and nodded, Lily's breath caught. The watchmaker slid it toward her. "Try it," he said. Lily picked it up, hands trembling. She opened it. The crack was still there. The scar didn't disappear, but inside the hands moved, slow, steady, tick, tick, tick. Lily stared. Her mouth parted. She lifted it to her ear like it was a seashell. Her shoulders shook once. Then she pressed it to her chest and leaned into June's side. June's eyes closed, relief breaking through her face like sunlight. Sterling stood behind them, watching that small miracle made of patience and care. Not magic, not money, time. June turned her head slightly, looking up at Sterling. Her voice came out quiet. "I ran because I thought nobody would protect us," she whispered. Sterling's gaze held hers. His voice was almost too low to hear. "I'm here now," he said. Lily looked up, watch ticking in her hands. She reached for Sterling's sleeve with 2 fingers, just barely holding on. Sterling glanced down at the small touch, then he didn't pull away. He let her hold him there. And for the first time, his silence wasn't a wall, it was a shelter. Before they left the shop, Sterling paused at the door. He looked back at the watchmaker. "Thank you," he said. The watchmaker nodded once. "Take care of your time," the old man replied. Sterling didn't answer with words. He simply put his hand over the pocket watch in Lily's hands. Gentle, careful, protective. And as they stepped out into the cold sunlight together, the ticking followed them. A small sound, a steady sound, a sound that said something broken can still be carried home, then repaired, then trusted again.